Meanwhile, Libya's interior ministers met the Turkish defence minister in Ankara to discuss the situation in Libya. Both leaders agreed to continue the cooperation between the two countries. Turkey supports the UN-recognised government in Tripoli, while you've got Egypt and the UAE and Russia backing Khalifa Haftar. For Libyan issues, we turn to Anas Al-Gomati, a political analyst and director of the Tripoli-based Sadeq Institute. He's in London. Good to see you again, Anas. I feel like there's some contradictions going on here. Egypt rubber stamps something essentially which allows President Sisi to use force outside of Egypt, yet there's this phone call with Donald Trump where they're saying, no, we're going to maintain the ceasefire and not escalate things.
Well, I think it's, to be perfectly honest, this has been the game of diplomacy where there is a public form of diplomacy and then a private reality. So publicly speaking, this is part of a strategy of brinkmanship that Egypt has engaged in, and many others in the region and outside of the region, including the UAE, who also support Haftar, Russia, who supports Haftar, and France. Now, leaving Russia aside for a moment, we have to realize that this is all intended, all of their theatrics now, the parliamentary approval, which is a rubber stamp. It's unanimous, which tells you a lot about Egyptian democracy. And it also is part of another series of meetings that they held with Libyan tribes, very old men in tribal uniform, when they couldn't muster bringing in the Libyan parliament or bringing in anything else that would offer legitimacy. Now, all of this theatrics in the public domain is that intended to show that they may breach the border with Libya, which is a massive escalation. It would be something that the US in particular and many other countries in the region would be scared about in terms of its possibility of creating further turmoil in Libya. Privately, they know that Turkey and the GNA, the government in Tripoli, the UN-backed government in Tripoli, are now intending on moving forward and pushing over this east-west divide. This city of Sirte is not just a symbolic city, it's a strategic city. It sits kilometers from Libya's oil. It also is the dividing point between east and west, and symbolically what could be one or two or even three states in Libya. Now, if the GNA and Turkey want to move forward, then Egypt is really, really worried about losing all of its influence in eastern Libya, Haftar losing control over the vital oil resources there. So it's about defending that and trying to create all of this theatrics, these smoke and mirrors, so to speak, in order to try and get Trump to make a phone call to Erdogan. This is phone call diplomacy at its worst, not its finest.
And nothing really, by the sounds of it, to do with the Libyan people. This is about everyone else at the moment. I know these are sides which back different sides in Libya ostensibly, but it's becoming one of, I don't like using this phrase, but one of these proxy wars.
It's worse than a proxy war at this moment in time. I mean, even the Libyan actors themselves are a form of plausible deniability. I mean, the engagement of Khalifa Haftar and his Libyan National Army. Most of the fighters are not Libyan. They're Russian, Chadian mercenaries, well documented by the United Nations panel of experts. It's certainly not national because it doesn't exist in one or even two parts of the country. And as an army, when you find Russian, 6'4", 6'5" Russians with massive tattoos on their sides, nothing looks like an army in Libya. So the idea of this being, about the Libyans or even engaging many of the Libyans is now a joke. Haftar isn't there. He doesn't have to rubber stamp any of the moves being made by the Egyptians or by the Russians. They are in charge of their own operations now. So I don't think it's even a proxy war. It's direct intervention. And it's strange that Egypt is talking about the fact that it needs to protect its own national interests when the sovereign government, the internationally recognized government of Libya, is trying to expand its territorial grip and retake its own territory. So it's a very bizarre set of circumstances that we find ourselves in. And to touch upon the first point that you made about Libyan civilians, if Libyan civilians were really the priority here, what about the hundreds of thousands that were displaced from Tripoli and fighting, the hundreds of thousands that were displaced and have been killed over the last several years in fighting in the east of the country, the 3 million whose water was stopped illegally for months during COVID-19. This has absolutely nothing to do with civilians or with even the idea of the responsibility to protect them. It's the irony that Libya's first transition came as the United Nations passed Resolution 1973 as a protection the responsibility to protect civilian lives in March 2011. So we've come a really, really long way from this incremental diplomacy, this really bad phone call diplomacy where it's all brinkmanship and hot air and smoke and mirrors and very, very little to do with the Libyan people themselves.
Always good to get some clarity from you, Anas Al-Gomati. Thank you.
Thank you.